Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon and good evening. I would like to extend a very warm welcome to all the speakers, roundtable participants, and everybody listening in to the roundtable event. The theme is Localizing Sustaining Peace, Partnerships for Community-Driven Positive Peace. I'm Suna. I'm from the International Rescue Committee. I'm Senior Programme and Learning Manager. Could I just ask everybody to be on mute until invited to contribute? The IRC responds to some of the world's worst crises, including many protracted crises around the world. And as well as delivering life-saving assistance, we also contribute towards longer-term recovery and development. And one of the programs through which we're making such contributions is the CEDA-funded Conflict Prevention and Peacebuilding Program that I've been managing since the start in 2018. And it's in DRC and Somalia. The program includes a learning component which is designed to generate and share learning throughout the program cycle. So I really welcome this opportunity to share learning with other peacebuilding actors and donors who are all contributing towards peacebuilding outcomes and towards the triple nexus. I would like to extend a special thanks towards CIPRI, especially for their flexibility in being able to adapt this to a virtual format, and that which has also enabled us to be able to bring together a diverse group of stakeholders, including many local peacebuilding organizations, donors, researchers, and implementing organizations. So many of the different organizations represented in this event are making various contributions like IRC, CEDA, and our local partners towards the Sustainable Development Goals. And with 10 years left to implement Agenda 2030, I think it's really very timely to discuss whether current efforts to localize responses to violent conflict are enough, and are we on track? What more can be done? And crucially now, how are these efforts being affected by the COVID-19 pandemic? So we'll be reflecting on positive peace approaches with some practical examples, and how these can be implemented through addressing, understanding and addressing the underlying root causes of violent conflict. And these include deep-seated grievances, human rights abuses, social injustice and exclusion, and weak institutions. And of course, those vary from context to context. But generally, a key learning for us as well is that the local actors are the best positioned and most appropriate, effective and sustainable peacebuilding actors, and best able to also identify and analyze conflict dynamics and root causes, and to be able to find solutions. So I really welcome this opportunity to reflect on localization and how this can be strengthened. Before I introduce the panel speakers, I would like to make a few housekeeping points to everybody. So please be aware that the event is on the record and it's being recorded. It will be shared through CIPRI's YouTube channel. We will first hear from the panelists. We have 4. And what the first will be a recording. So please be aware that, I think it'll be obvious, but where necessary, we've had to record some of the contributions. And then after we've heard from all the panelist speakers, we will open up to questions from roundtable participants. Please remember to raise your hand and so that I can see that in the participants list, and I'll call you to unmute yourself to be able to ask your question. The other participants who are just listening in, they don't have that ability, but they will be able to ask questions in the chat. And I encourage everybody to, please do contribute to the discussion in the chat and ask questions, because we will get a chance, I hope, to be able to explore some of these questions afterwards, perhaps through a written Q&A, because I'm sure with the time available, we won't be able to go as deep as we would like on as many of the questions as we hope to get. And also a reminder, because time is limited, please make your contributions as short as you can, 3 minutes, for example. And please do participate with the polling question, which should be displayed now. We have one now and we have one at the end of the event. So I think we can go to our first speaker, Father David Ngoy Luhaka, who's Director of the Justice and Peace Commission of the Diocese of Kalemie-Kirungu, CDJP, from the Tanganyika province in the DRC. This is a local partner working with the IRC in the CEDA-funded Conflict Prevention and Peacebuilding Programme, and the project that CDJP is working with us to implement is about linking health and humanitarian assistance to long-term development opportunities. So, David, please do play the video.
Distingués invités, chers conférenciers, la commission de diocésaine justice et paix de Kalemie-Kirungu, CDJP en sigle, c'est un institut citoyen de la RDC qui s'occupe des questions liées à la justice sociale. Et dans son mandat, la CDJP a beaucoup travaillé dans la pacification. Pacification auprès des groupes armés, pacification auprès de la société civile, pacification auprès de beaucoup d'acteurs au niveau du Tanganyika et au niveau d'autres entités. Il vous souviendra pour le Tanganyika que depuis une décennie, cette province à l'est de la RDC connaît un conflit violent dénommé conflit entre Pygmées et Bantous. Ce conflit a fait d'énormes dégâts, des dégâts humains, matériels et j'en passe. Et quand on interroge les causes profondes de ces conflits, nous avons entre autres la discrimination sociale, une discrimination qui fait que la plupart des Bantous pensent être supérieurs aux Tois ou aux Pygmées, et certains Pygmées pensent être inférieurs aux Bantous. Nous avons aussi comme cause la ruée vers l'accès à la terre. Nous avons la question des services sociaux de base. Nous avons la question des stigmates passés, des violences entre les forces régulières et les groupes armés où les Tois comme miliciens ont participé. Nous avons aussi la question des ressources naturelles. La CDJP et ses partenaires, à savoir IRC, SIDA et bien d'autres, ont travaillé à cela. Et ayant travaillé à cela, nous sommes arrivés à des stratégies qui ont donné de bons résultats. C'est des stratégies qui nous ont permis de passer des graves violences des années 2010 jusqu'en 2018, jusqu'à aujourd'hui, à l'apaisement et je dirais même à une cohabitation pacifique entre les Pygmées et les Bantous dans beaucoup de contrées. Qu'est-ce que nous avons fait pour arriver à cette cohésion? Nous avons mis en place la stratégie dénommée celle de la mise en place des comités locaux de paix. C'est des comités locaux de paix qui sont mixtes, où nous avons à la fois 7 Pygmées, 7 Bantous qui travaillent ensemble de manière à gérer les conflits au niveau de la communauté. Nous avons mis aussi en exergue l'alphabétisation fonctionnelle, où la plupart des femmes, Tois comme Bantous, ont été ensemble, elles ont su lire, écrire et compter, et aujourd'hui, elles sont non seulement indépendantes, mais elles sont devenues utiles à la communauté. Une autre stratégie, c'est celle de mettre en place les activités qui génèrent les recettes. Nous avons eu des résultats escomptés, des résultats qui ont fait en sorte que certaines communautés mixtes, entre Tois et Bantous, sont devenues des communautés autonomes et je dirais même unies. Mais nous avons aussi l'accompagnement des comités locaux de paix par nous, la CDJP, avec l'appui des SIDA et des IRC. Cet accompagnement nous a permis à ce que les comités locaux de paix arrivent à être de bons interlocuteurs de la communauté auprès des autorités. Il y a beaucoup de défis, mais parmi les défis, je citerai l'allégeance de certains leaders à des groupes armés. Qu'à cela ne tienne, je dirais que pour les Tanganyika, le travail abattu par la CDJP, avec l'appui de beaucoup d'agences, dont IRC et SIDA, a mis ensemble et continue à mettre ensemble les deux communautés. En les mettant ensemble, nous avons aujourd'hui non seulement une accalmie, mais nous avons un travail qui se fait ensemble. Nous avons une cohésion entre les deux communautés, laquelle cohésion fait en sorte que, au lieu que la méfiance reste entre les deux communautés, nous avons aujourd'hui un travail qui se fait en commun entre les deux communautés. Cela est à appuyer, à soutenir et à applaudir. Je dis et je vous remercie.
Thank you so much, Father David, for your contribution, sharing the rich experience of the CDJP in peace building in Tanganyika province and the various challenges that that remain in that context. You'll see that we have now the polling, the responses to the first question. I think the answer seems to be pretty clear and unanimous that there's not enough currently being done to localize responses to violent conflict. 95% answering no to that question. So I think that also reinforces that, you know, this is a timely discussion, and hopefully one that we can continue having towards finding faster collective solutions. I would like now to go to our next speaker, Clare Devlin. Clare is the Senior Conflict and Security Advisor at Saferworld. Clare will reflect on current issues in localization and the triple nexus, and Saferworld's experience in the conflict advisory unit. So over to you, Clare.
Thanks. Did you know that local civil society organizations similar to CDJP we just heard from, in a humanitarian situation, would probably receive only about 0.4% of the available funding directly? About 96% of funding goes to a relatively small range of international humanitarian responders, the big UN agencies and large international NGOs. Why do I bring up humanitarian financing in a session on community-driven positive peace? Because in a conflict-driven crisis, the humanitarian response is very meaningful for what might be possible in peace building. It makes a big difference whether or not humanitarians are sensitive to conflict dynamics in their work. For example, unknowingly distributing crucial relief goods to people who are actually all from a group on one side of a conflict can end by causing conflict and doing more harm than good, including affecting long-term prospects for positive peace. Now, think of the potential that exists within local civil society for laying a foundation for community-driven positive peace. Conflict-affected people themselves and the local civil society around them that they create are typically the first responders to a crisis because they're there already. They do a lot, and in some cases, the majority of actual implementation of humanitarian relief. In Syria, about 75% of humanitarian work inside the country was done by Syrian civil society. They received about 1% of available funding directly. The local civil society tends to have a deep understanding of the context and its conflicts, something that international responders often struggle to build. And finally, they stick around the longest. So this potential is part of the rationale for two major international efforts on humanitarian reform. One is to improve the triple nexus of coordinated work on humanitarian relief, long-term development and peace building. And the other is on localization of humanitarian action. Localization involves getting more means into the hands of conflict-affected people, but it hasn't made much progress yet, largely because it's remained focused on technical fixes rather than getting into the politics of shifting power from international actors to local ones. So Saferworld and Save the Children collaborated on a report recently looking into how the tables could be turned in favor of local actors. You can access that report in the materials for this session. It presents a few models of how power could be shifted to release the potential of local actors. I notice that somebody is finding it hard to hear me. I'll try to slow down. I hope it's not my mic.
I can hear you well, Claire.
Okay, good, good. Okay, so these models that we went through in the report show how power could be shifted to release the potential of local actors. One is a model that Save the Children worked to in Syria, the Bribes Model. In contrast to conventional humanitarian programs, the explicit objective of the RISE program was to build a sustainable and active civil society in Syria, capable of supporting humanitarian needs in the short term and eventually recovery. It was a multi-year program, not 6 months or a year, which would be more typical. And the civil society organizations coordinated with a single HQ, not with a single HQ, but with sub-national hubs set up by Save the Children around the country. Now, one result of following that model was that a group of international NGOs changed their practice, and they agreed a single organizational assessment for working with Syrian organizations that freed the Syrian organizations from burdensome administration with multiple international partners and allowed them to concentrate on building their technical capacity, which they did in child protection specifically. A model that goes further than this is the Local to Global Protection Program led by the international NGO Christian Aid. They worked with 2 national NGOs in Rakhine state of Myanmar and 1 each in Cayenne and Kachin states. Each state was seriously affected by conflict. And this model was developed as a deliberate alternative to conventional top-down models. The Myanmar NGOs carried out an assessment process with local civil society in their chosen target areas. Grants, that each of those national NGOs received a grant of $10,000 to cover their management and operational costs, which local civil society organizations often don't get. Then those national NGOs made grants on a collective basis to local civil society and communities, not necessarily formal organizations, but networks of youth and women, for example, in some cases. And one result of this was that the communities identified enhanced social cohesion and psychosocial benefits, which they attributed to the collective nature of the grants. And that is an outcome on social cohesion from a humanitarian program that indicates how collective outcomes on peace could be achieved by changing models of local international partnership. I think the positive outcomes from these models have some implications for INGOs and donors. So all of the models are good, but they're small. Making any one of them a more standard approach would involve confronting issues of trust, transfer of risk, and the risks to institutional growth for international NGOs. And especially, it would involve confronting the biases or prejudices that underlie poor trust. So advancing a progressive vision of localization will require uncomfortable conversations on why international actors won't let go of such a lopsided arrangement. Donors and pioneering INGOs could do a lot to confront that. Secondly, supporting civil society systems as a whole rather than individual organizations project by project could be a very significant strategy for donors and INGOs to realize the potential of local actors, including for positive peace. And thirdly and finally, humanitarian agencies and donors should explicitly consider the enhanced conflict sensitivity and the potential for a foundation of triple nexus programming and positive peace that could emerge from a genuine transfer of power to local organizations.
Thank you, Claire. It's really great to hear these insights, and I mean, you've thrown in quite a few challenges there, which I'm sure we won't necessarily solve on this call alone, but we can absolutely continue that conversation. So thank you so much. I would like to go to our next speaker, Nasra Hassan, who is our governance and rights coordinator for the International Rescue Committee. Nasra will share experiences from the Access to Justice project in Somalia, which is part of the CEDA Conflict Prevention and Peace Building program that we are implementing, funded by CEDA. And it is a contribution, the project's a contribution towards positive peace through enhancing access to justice. So Nasra, over to you, please.
Thank you, Suna. Greetings from Mogadishu, everyone. Special thanks to the organizers of the forum and everyone who took their time to participate and attend this year. We are in a special crisis this year, a pandemic that has robbed us of several lives across the globe and still continues to take lives. Somalia, as you're all aware, tops the global pandemic risk index. In Somalia, we have currently over 1,400 COVID-19 cases and over 50 people have lost their lives. And they still sustain transmission in country, which means that the numbers will exponentially rise in the next coming weeks or months. So the pandemic has obviously affected how IRC implements activities, but we've assessed each activity in terms of criticality. Health, for example, is an essential service and it's being delivered whilst mitigation measures are put in place, as such services are provided to IDP community members who live in IDP camps. Peace-building activities, however, have been suspended to minimize interaction of individuals and also as part of staff safety. Only activity currently we have ongoing is the media-based civic education campaign. And this year we're working with our health team to integrate messages of COVID-19 into the access to justice public service announcements. Well, I think the situation in Somalia is not foreign to anyone here. We've had protracted violence destroying state institutions and infrastructure, which has created a state where that's solely dependent on foreign aid. Mogadishu, the capital city here, hosts over 600,000 IDPs that depend on handouts from well-wishers and NGOs. In terms of civilian population, there's gross human rights abuses that go unreported due to the weak justice system. Women and girls are victims of sexual and gender-based violence. Just a week ago, we were informed by a local non-governmental organization that collects such data that a 4-year-old girl was raped. And this is an occurrence that sometimes happens on a daily, on a weekly, which is frequent. So why positive peace then? It brings inclusive participation that assists in addressing causes of violent conflict. In Somalia, the failings of the justice system results in efforts by the population to take justice matters into their own hands. This often manifests itself in the victim carrying out violent actions against the alleged perpetrator and perpetuates an endless cycle of violence. Currently, we are implementing a CEDA-funded access to justice project in Mogadishu, specifically in 2 districts, that is rooted in the positive peace approach that I mentioned. So the main objectives of the project are 1, to build the capacity of the justice service providers, the formal and informal justice service actors, as well. And the second objective is to ensure that community members are aware of their rights and entitlements when accessing formal and informal justice systems. Something as simple as the right to property is not common to everyone, especially to women in this context. So far, what have we achieved in the past 2.5 years? We've improved availability of effective dispute resolution mechanisms through the capacity building efforts of the project, as well as the awareness raising campaigns. We've also noted inclusive and non-discriminatory access to justice services, specifically in the 2 districts. And we've also witnessed increased number of people coming from other districts into these 2 districts to seek justice services. We've also witnessed improved trust between community members and their duty bearers. Some of the key lessons we've learned in the past 2.5 years is that the local ownership and inclusivity and sustainability are essential to success of the project, or any project working in this context. The fact that we are working with local structures such as the district peace committees or community paralegals that are embedded in the community enhances local ownership of the project. Another main lesson that we've learned is that being outcome oriented is just not being about about basing project design on the best available evidence, but it's also adapting to the context changes. What I mean by this is that there's need to be flexible and responsive to the context changes. the project had a strong focus on conflict sensitivity. I'd like to conclude by saying that in the recent months, we've witnessed a trend of development and peace-building donors diverting development and peace-building funds to fight the pandemic. While we're all aware that we are in a critical time and that we need all the resources to fight the pandemic, we also need to be cognizant of the fact that a country like Somalia needs long-term sustainable investment in humanitarian and development sectors so that our peace-building efforts over the last many years are not negated. And to conclude, I want to appreciate the opportunity that SIDA has provided us through the Access to Justice project to work with the local partners and local institutions and to operationalize the triple nexus through this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Nasra, for sharing in just a few minutes the rich experiences we've had in implementing the project in Mogadishu. Thank you so much. Let's go now to our last speaker, Emma Nilenfors, who is the head of the Unit for Peace and Human Security at SIDA. So Emma will share the donor perspective now. SIDA is the donor for the IRC's conflict prevention and peacebuilding program, and Emma's unit is leading the implementation of Sweden's sustainable peace strategy. Emma, over to you, please.
Thank you, Suna. I'm very happy to be with you today. It has been so inspiring to be able to listen to David, Clare, and Nasra. Thanks a lot for sharing your experiences. And I'm happy to hear that you are happy and proud of your work, and you should be, because this is what it's all about. Human security and peace building at the local level. That is what we all aim for. So I would just like to share 3 perspectives from us at SIDA. I would like to touch upon 3 areas today, very briefly. So many very good things has already been said, so I will not try to repeat them. But I would like to talk to you about security, financing, and COVID-19. So let's start about security. As many of you already mentioned, when we were working on local peace building, we really want to address the root causes of conflict. Father David talked about access to land. Nasra, you also talked about right to property. And we as donors should be aware of, if we really want to address root causes of conflict, that implies also security risks, because there are powerful actors and structures that are not in favor of sustainable peace at the local level. There will be resistance, and we should be aware as donors that when we are providing support to local actors, there might be serious security risks involved, and we should have a dialogue about that. I remember a few years ago when I worked in Colombia, we gathered many very brilliant peace-building women from all different regions in Colombia to be able to share experience of peace building, but also to be able to give input to the ongoing peace talk at that time between the Colombian government and the FARC guerrilla. And one of those women said to me, "Yes, Emma, freedom of speech is important, but it's even more important to be able to have freedom after speak." So I think this is something we really, all of us, need to take into account and have a dialogue with our partners about security and what we as donors can do in order to strive for more protection, especially when we have a shrinking space for civil society. We have peace-building actors that might run into threats and also killings. We have also a responsibility to engage in that dialogue. It is, of course, always the state that has the responsibility to provide security for its citizens. But we should do our part as donors to enable protection for brave people that work for peace building every day. Secondly, I would also like to say a few words about financing, since I am a donor. Even though financing is not everything, but it's still important. So what is our role as a donor if we want to support local peace building? First of all, we need to be present. It's impossible for us to sit in Stockholm and try to figure out what are the most relevant peacekeeping actions, what are the actors that we would like to have partnerships with. We need to be present in the context. And that is also why we at SIDA, we have strengthened our staffs at the different embassies, and we also have a quite decentralized decision-making process. Our colleagues at the embassies have the possibility to decide upon who should we work with. Another part that is important for us as a donor when we work is at an embassy is that we can also be bridge builders. We can be a meeting space. We can be a connector between different actors working for peace in the country. We can convene the business people, the military, academia, human rights activities, indigenous group, religious leader. The embassy could be a place where it's possible to meet. Sometimes I feel that when we work on peace building, it's so easy to talk with the usual suspects. At times we need to broaden our perspective, bring in new perspectives, and that we can also have as our role as the donors at times. Thirdly, on financing, I really want to stress long-term core funding. If we really believe in local peace building, we should also have trust in the capacity and the context-based analysis of our partners. You are the one on the ground, you know what is needed, you know what ways to take. And we should also be able to permit mistakes. Things happen, we need to change, we need to adapt, we need to learn from what has been working and not been working, and we need to be flexible as the donors and really strive for core term funding. And also make sure that when we have priorities, for instance, working with women, peace and security, or youth, peace and security, also to be able to not only talk about it, but what Clare was also talking about, provide funds directly to local women's peace organizations, to youth-led organizations. We need to be willing to take some risks, be brave, have a portfolio with different kinds of actors, continue with multilateral support, international NGOs, but also to take some risk and provide also financial supports to local organizations. And finally, just a few words on the COVID-19. I think Nasra, you gave a very excellent description of the situation today. We are all in this together in different parts. And I can see from our partners, I'm actually quite impressed. And I think that is also part of the objective of a peace building organizations. You are used to doing appropriate adjustments. And I can see how many of you have responded very well in this crisis. You have been able to provide information, access to information. We see there is a lot of disinformation around here. And I think it's very important that we are able to provide correct information about measures to be taken to different parts, also to conflict-affected populations. We have also seen examples of how our partners have been able to engage in dialogue with non-state armed actors on the need for humanitarian access, but also on the global call for ceasefire, to take this as an opportunity to strive for more peace and common work together in these difficult times. Unfortunately, we have also seen an increased level of violence, as Nasra was also mentioning, against women and children in these COVID times. So I think that's also important for us as peace-building actors to do whatever we can in this terms of supporting also women and girls that have been caused by violence. I will stop there just with one final quote. I think when we work for peace building, we see a lot of horrible things happening every day. We have a lot of brave people out there, and it's important for all of us, I think, to do what we have. A Swedish former foreign minister, her name is Anna Lindh. She was killed 17 years ago, but on my desk here at SIDA, I have a quote from her that says, in Swedish it says, "Uppgivenheten är vår främsta fiende." In English it is, "Our foremost enemy is to give up." So I think all of us, we are here. We have the hope for peace. We will not give up. We will continue. And especially all of you brave local peace builders around the world. Thank you for excellent work.
Thank you so much, Emma. And I really appreciate you placing emphasis on recognizing the risks that local partners take, and that we as international partners need to be really mindful about that in our approaches and our strategies and in how we understand risk and protection. So thank you so much. We've heard from all of the speakers now, so I would really like to ask roundtable participants to raise their hands so we can get some questions from them. We have only 25 minutes left now, and I would really like to get as many questions as possible from the other roundtable participants, and then go back to the panel for final reactions. If I can ask as well, all participants, if they can put the organization name or their affiliation in their name field. You can change that by, I believe everyone should be able to change that by clicking their cursor over their name. Because it would be great, we have lots of participants here. We have over 80. It would be great to be able to see where people are coming from. And of course, please do, roundtable participants, when you come forward, I will announce your name, but also if I don't have that, I might need you to also introduce yourself. So, but please keep your contributions short. I see one panelist with their hand up. I can't quite see who that is. I'm afraid I can't really see that, but I see it. I see Christine from Caritas Uganda on the screen, and I know that you have a question to ask. I would really like to hear from another local organization. So Christine, if you're ready with your question now.
Thank you, Suna. I'm Christine Laura Okello from Caritas Uganda. I just have one question. When the crisis ends, travel restrictions removed, donors, international and local organization staff return to their work, what is the likely space they would occupy? Will the power dynamic change? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christine. I think that's a very relevant question. And I hope we will get time to touch on that. I believe Linnea from Folkabana.academy is the panelist with her hand up. I don't see very well, but Linnea, please do introduce yourself and ask your question.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed the panelists' contributions. Thank you. I wanted to ask something related to the research that I've been doing in Somalia, especially South Central Somalia, which relates to a sort of booming PVE, CVE business. And I'm going to call it that because I was thinking about what Emma from SIDA was saying about funding and the importance of core funding. I can only agree with that statement. And I was wondering how this is seen from, for example, our colleague from Mogadishu, Nasra's perspective, because the way I understand it, a project like hers, Access to Justice, there is a tendency right now for rule of law, so the UNSOM Urolsi section, for example, to start collaborating with NGOs and local peace builders, but also in the dual interest of not only peace building, but also preventing violent extremism. And that redraws the lines of funding, of accountability, and of the way we view the youth and the people that we work with that have humanitarian or developmental needs. And I'm very interested in this nexus that is now appearing and becoming stronger between PVE, CVE related work and funding, and between that we have tended to call humanitarian work and developmental work. I'd love to hear from Nasra and from other panelists if you would like to respond. Thank you.
Thank you, Linnea. Let me see which hands we have up now on the panel. Let's go to, sorry, 1 second, I'm still seeing, perhaps this is the display that I have here, but it only shows me 3 people at a time on the screen. Yes, let's hear from Ahmed at Save Somali Women and Children, please.
Thank you very much, Suna. I appreciate the time the panelists took in providing us the briefings that they had. My question is that how can we fully enhance the localization agenda in the triple nexus, considering the grand bargain commitments that are not implemented at all? Another question is to Emma. She said SIDA is doing a lot by ensuring that they have number of personnel at the embassies. How sure are you that this is enough to ensure that local NGOs are funded in the peace building processes? Thank you.
Thank you, Ahmad. Those are 2 short but pretty powerful questions, so thank you so much. Let's see. Let's go to Patrick Catello from Phaedo in Kenya.
Hi everyone, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I'm Patrick Catello from Phaedo. My question is, having heard that the cause of conflicts are many, and of course others are natural based, others are politically instigated, others are of supremacy, external and internal borders conflict, ethnic based conflict, and all these. As a local actor and as a local organization, I'm just relating to Grand Bargain initiative, whereas local organizations are supposed to be having a space in terms of trying to be the first respondent. Having been in the local, of course, we always have the opportunity of responding to issues firsthand. But how is this space getting us far as a local organization? And also how far are funding on the same reaching from different partner organizations or bilateral bodies or UN bodies in terms of addressing peace issues in different parts of the world? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Patrick. Great questions. Let me just go to see who else has their hand up. I don't see it really well. Oliver Dorban. It'd be great to hear from you. Another donor perspective would be really welcome at this time. So please do go ahead and make your contribution.
Hi, thank you, Suna. It's Oliver here from the German Embassy in Nairobi. And my question is related to how we can better integrate locally produced knowledge in our projects. And by that, I mean, how can we better integrate work with local think tanks, research institutions, etc., so that that knowledge informs our project design, our conflict analyses, our project implementation, and maybe also linking to what Clare said before. Can we think this not only in terms of partnerships with one individual agency or actor, but can we also think this in terms of supporting civil society actor as a whole here? And so I'd be very interested in hearing if there's experiences on this from the panelists, any challenges experienced in that regard, and so on. Thank you.
Thank you, Oliver. I've expanded the participants list now so I can more easily see who's got their hand up. And let's go to Mark Phaedo from the ICSP. in Brussels. Mark, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you very much, Suna. I'm Mark Friedrich, from the Service for Foreign Policy Instruments at the European Commission. So thanks, first of all, to all the participants and all the panelists for those very convincing statements about the usefulness of integrating, of making sure that peace building is indeed with local actors. I think most of the panelists have made a case for it on the grounds of the adaptness of local actors and local organizations to undertake peace building. I think one can also make the argument the other way around, simply by saying that most conflicts, by the time they are still local, can be much more easily addressed and dealt with than by the time they've become regional or even national or international. So there's definitely a strong case to be made for this, not only in terms of the strength of the local actors, but also in terms of the simple nature of conflicts. But the question that I was going to ask to the panelists is, there was a lot of discussion about the importance of trust in terms of making sure that localization takes place. So the question I have is, how can we build that trust better, taking into account also some of the constraints that Emma and also others before have already made with regards to both security, but also oftentimes with regards to the personnel that donors have and the possibilities that donors have to engage with a broad range of actors in different contexts. So, is it about more standardization? Is it about, more exchange of best practices? How can we build that trust that would allow donors to, take risks more easily in terms of betting on local actors more often? Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Mark. We have now only 12 minutes left for the rest of this meeting. We've had some really excellent questions. And I would really like to go back to our panel now to allow them to also respond. So with a couple of minutes each, should we go first to Father David from the CDJP in Tanganyika, if you're ready? Bien fait.
Suna. Oui.
Merci,
oui,
allez-y.
Suna. Oui, pour la première question. Oui, la première question a été un peu générale. Et nous avons estimé qu'on pouvait y répondre parce que, donc, après l'implémentation des projets, pour ce qui est de notre stratégie, les CLP vont rester. Et en restant, nous avons tenu à les rendre institutionnels. Oui. Donc, les comités locaux de paix, pour nous, c'est des structures qu'on va rendre institutionnelles à travers le ministère de l'Intérieur. C'est la stratégie que nous avons prévue et laquelle stratégie sera mise en œuvre. Donc, ce sera des structures pérennes, durables, qui vont être appuyées par l'État, mais en même temps aussi par nous-mêmes, la CDJP, qui sommes implantés un peu plus partout. C'est l'avantage que nous avons dans la stratégie des comités locaux de paix. Voilà comment nous avons pensé rendre durable la stratégie de pérennisation. Translation.
Well, if I can translate or interpret, we have put in place the local committees. Okay, the local peace committees. We are going to institutionalize through the ministry, I mean, Interior Ministry. Yeah, in that way, they are going to be like the ambassadors to link them with the government. Means the government and the communities. So they are going to be beneficiaries.
De nos structures permanentes.
What? Okay, the permanent structures from CDJP, which are installed or implemented in there. So that is our strategy. So at the same time, they're going to reinforce other civil societies which are already installed.
Thank you so much, Father David. It's great to hear about, beyond the partnership with IRC, but also it's really important that you reflect on the sustainability of the local committees and the local structures that are being supported, and how they can be made institutionally strong, because their work is in many ways the most important at community level. So thank you so much for sharing that perspective. I will just, before we go to the other panel speakers, I will also like to allow for a question from the chat, because I think there's been a lively chat discussion. Mark Bradshaw is moderating the chat, and I believe, Mark, you're ready with a question.
Sure, maybe just a short one in the interest of time, but this is a really interesting one on the localization front from Islamic Relief. The COVID pandemic is teaching us that localization is at a critical juncture. The localization of assistance is even more critical now than ever. What are the key things to consider in the localization of peace building? Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Islamic Relief. If our panel speakers can try to respond to that one as well, that would be great. But I realise there are many questions here, and I think probably in the time available, we can just allow ourselves, allow the panelists to pick on one or two key points that are most resonant for them. So let's go to Clare.
Thanks. So really quickly, maybe I could just respond to the question on trust, and maybe that will relate a little bit to integrating local knowledge into analysis. I think we need to learn lessons, our own technical lessons of peace building, which is that trust is built up over a series of positive interactions for both parties. And in our report, you'll notice on localization, there's not really that many recommendations for local civil society or NGOs. Most recommendations actually go to our peer group of other international NGOs, and to a certain extent also to donors. So I think the onus really is on is on INGOs to get a bit more internal coherence so that we can have those trusting interactions. So for example, not requiring independent monitoring to be done by a person who flies out from the HQ to the local partner and looks at it. There are lots of possibilities and practical things like peer reviews from within a range of civil society partners, and accepting that as independent monitoring. There's one thing that you could do immediately, and there's a lot as well on getting coherence between the programming technical advisors and the people in charge of financial compliance, if they can agree new kind of compromises, new agreements internally. And then give local partners a little bit more freedom and see how it goes, and develop that series of interactions. That's really how you build the trust. And I think in terms of the integration of local knowledge as well, I think we have to, of course, we're poisoned by our own jargon a lot of the time, this idea that you must have a certain needs assessment process and there's a standard way of doing it, and you must do targeting household by household or individual by individual. There are really important reasons that they became so important in humanitarian action, but I think trust would be able to replace some of those things, and you could get a different range of knowledge from local partners that way. In Myanmar, for example, although local communities, when they were consulted, of course they mentioned their basic needs and things like shelter, water, nutrition, but they also were much more likely to prioritize social cohesion and community relations as something that they needed to improve. So that comes out of the Christian aid model in the report. One last thing, I just noticed a question come up in the chat about what if we really did turn the tables and humanitarian actors became totally reliant on local organizations, and then in a serious state conflict, they became very vulnerable either to being eliminated or totally co-opted. There's actually long sections in our report about that, so I would direct people who are interested in that question. It's fundamental to look at the text.
Thank you, Claire. We're down to the last 4 minutes, so we're going to have to multitask here. David, can you give us the final polling question, please? Can I ask all participants who have other questions to share or other responses, please do put them in the chat or in the Q&A, because we will try to respond to those in with a written Q&A after the report. Sorry, after this event. Emma, if I go to you, will you be able to give a response in 2 minutes, or is that unrealistic?
No, it's not unrealistic. I have also seen a lot of very good questions directed to SIDA in the chat, but since they are in the chat, those we can respond afterwards in the Q&A written. So I will try to see if I manage to catch what was said during this conversation. I understand there was a specific question from Ahmed on if it's sufficient to have more staff at the embassy. Does that guarantee support to local NGOs for local peace building? No, that's not a guarantee, but it's a good start because when we want to build trust and we want to be able to engage in dialogue, we need to have people there, but it's not enough. We also have to make the correct decisions. There was also a question on security risk and if SIDA can share what mechanisms we are using. I have tried to get in contact with the colleague here that has been working a lot on that issue lately. We have a decision, a very recent decision from our Director General, Karin Jämtin, that relates to how we engage in dialogue with our partners on security. So the person who wrote this question, you can get back to me and we can continue and share more on that one. I will stop there in order for you, Suna, also to sum up. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And I think, I'm sorry, Nasra, I think this means that we may be able to go back to you, but we will be able to have your responses to some of the questions, and particularly the question from Linnea. We have only 2 minutes left. So I would like to encourage everybody again to use the polling, to respond to the polling question and any final questions in the chat. Please also have a look at the landing sites for this event. It's now a really rich repository of lots of material from the different participating organizations. We may still be able to add to it, and I believe it will remain accessible after the event. So please do go there and to have a look at the different contributions. I mean, we've made a start in addressing some questions, but obviously there are many more questions and many more discussions that need to happen. And so I'm really pleased that we've at least made a start in the time available, and we've sparked discussion here, which we will commit to continuing. I would like to thank everybody for participating, and especially to Cypri, Martina, and David for their support in co-hosting and co-convening this event. And I think, one key takeaway for me is that, there are many challenges that remain for localization. I hope that there's more commitment now, or heightened commitment to be able to address these and to find collective solutions. And to have the different conversations that we need to have internally, as well as between different partners and among peers, to see how that can be catalyzed. And ultimately, we're all interested in finding better collective solutions and outcomes for people affected by conflict, and that's what we're here for, and I feel we've made some progress towards identifying those. So thank you everybody so much for your different contributions. Let's keep the conversations going. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Merci, Suna.
Merci, Monsieur l'Abbé.